In a small town in Vermont called Riverside, there's a photograph hanging in the Historical Society Museum that no one is quite sure how to explain. It's been there for over 50 years, and the curator has asked multiple times whether it should remain on display. But the museum board always votes to keep it, because the photograph tells a story that the town has tried to forget a story that's impossible to ignore once you've seen the image. The photograph was taken in 1957 by a photographer named Henry Wallace, who was documenting life in Riverside for a national magazine series on small-town America. Henry was a professional, acclaimed in his field, known for capturing genuine moments of American life. His work was powerful and honest, but one photograph from his Riverside collection stood out as profoundly strange. The photograph shows a town picnic in Riverside Park. It's a beautiful summer day, tables laden with food, families gathered in clusters, children playing. Henry captured it during a peak moment when everyone was relaxed and happy. There are approximately 80 people visible in the photograph, all posed naturally, laughing or engaged in conversation. The image is perfect in every way, a quintessential American summer scene, except for one detail. If you look carefully at the background, half hidden behind a large oak tree, there's a figure that shouldn't be there. It appears to be a man, tall and impossibly thin, wearing clothing that seems anachronistic for 1957. He's wearing what looks like clothing from at least 50 years earlier, the 1900s perhaps. His face is turned directly toward the camera, and his expression is blank, utterly devoid of emotion. But the most disturbing detail is his eyes. They're entirely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eye socket. Just absolute darkness where his eyes should be. When Henry first showed the photograph to the newspaper editor, the editor immediately suggested it was a photographic error or a shadow that coincidentally resembled a human figure. Henry was certain it wasn't. He remembered taking the shot, and while he hadn't consciously noticed the figure at the time, the focus was on the family groups. Something about the image seemed wrong when he developed it in the darkroom. Henry had an enlargement made, focusing on the figure behind the tree. In the enlargement, there was no question. It was a person, and that person was staring directly at the camera with those impossible black eyes. Henry decided to investigate. He visited the Historical Society and pulled the picnic guest list from that a list that had been compiled by the town council for documentation purposes. There were 78 names on the list. Henry looked at the photograph again and counted the people. 80. 2 extra people had appeared in the photograph who weren't on the guest list. One was an older woman on the far left when Henry interviewed people at the museum. No one could identify her. The other was the figure behind the tree. Henry became obsessed. He interviewed townspeople who attended the picnic, showing them the photograph and asking if they recognized the figure. People became uncomfortable. One man, Richard Carlisle, who lived in Riverside his entire life, took one look at the photograph, turned very pale, and told Henry to stop asking questions. When Henry pressed him, Richard left and didn't return his calls. Henry eventually dropped the matter and moved on to other assignments. The photograph was published in the national magazine as part of his series, though it generated unusually few comments. Most readers seemed to miss the strange detail in the background, or they assumed it was a trick of light and shadow. Years passed. Henry died in 1985. His archives were donated to various institutions and museums. The Riverside Historical Society acquired several of his photographs from his Riverside collection, including the picnic photograph. It was hung in the museum in 1975 and has remained there ever since. But something odd began to happen in Riverside around 1980. People started reporting strange occurrences, encounters with a tall, impossibly thin figure wearing outdated clothing. He would appear in peripheral vision, standing perfectly still, watching. When people turned to look directly at him, he'd vanish. But everyone who reported seeing him mentioned the same thing: his eyes, or the absence of them, just solid blackness where eyes should be. Old people who'd attended the picnic in 1957 started mentioning it to their children and grandchildren. They began to theorize that something was captured in Henry's photograph, and that the act of photographing fixing its image on film had done something. One elderly woman, Margaret Thompson, was interviewed by a local reporter in 1982. She said that she remembered the day of the picnic vividly, and she also remembered having a strange sense of being watched. She said that after the photograph was published and she saw it, she started experiencing nightmares. In the nightmares, the figure behind the tree would turn fully toward her, and those black eyes would grow larger and larger until she woke up screaming. Margaret claimed that the nightmares started affecting her health. She became frail and anxious. She began drinking heavily. She was hospitalized multiple times for psychological evaluations. In 1985, Margaret walked into the woods behind her home and was found 3 days later, severely dehydrated and incoherent. She kept muttering about the eyes from the tree. Margaret lived for another 5 years, but never fully recovered mentally. More cases accumulated. People who'd attended the picnic or whose relatives had attended reported increased anxiety, nightmares, and inexplicable episodes of feeling watched. Some experienced deterioration in their health and mental state. Others reported seeing the figure Euro, the same tall, thin figure with the black eyes of Euro, appearing randomly in Riverside, always watching, never approaching. In 1990, a researcher named Dr. Elizabeth Hartman became interested in the phenomenon. She traveled to Riverside to study the case, interviewing descendants of picnic attendees and examining the photograph in detail. She brought in colleagues to analyze the photograph using enhanced imaging technology. Their conclusion was striking. The figure behind the tree showed no sign of photographic manipulation or tampering. The image was genuine, created at the moment the photograph was taken in 1957. Dr. Hartman proposed a theory. Whatever was captured in the photograph existed in that moment, and somehow its image Euro, its essence, Perpopsa Euro, was transferred to the photograph. She suggested that people who viewed the photograph were somehow being exposed to something that existed outside normal perception, but her colleagues dismissed the theory as pseudoscience. What was undeniable, however, was the cluster of health and psychological issues among people connected to the photograph, particularly those who'd attended the picnic. Local health officials conducted a study and found a statistically significant correlation between attendance at the 1,957 picnic and subsequent health complications, mental health issues, and early death. By 2000, fewer than 20 people were still alive who had attended the original picnic. Of those 20, 14 had experienced significant psychological or health problems in their later years. 3 had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, including the man who told Henry to stop investigating. The last surviving attendee, James Morrison, gave an interview to the Riverside Record in 2005, just before his death. He said something that unsettled everyone who read it. "I saw that thing at the picnic, not with my eyes Euro, not at first, but I saw it. I felt it watching us all. And when Henry took the photograph, I knew something terrible had happened. Because now it was trapped. Trapped, but not imprisoned. Every time someone looks at that photograph, they let it out a little more. Every year, more people see it, and it gets stronger. It's not haunting us because we took the photograph. It's haunting us because we made it real. We put it on film. We preserved it. We gave it permanence." James died a week after giving that interview. The official cause was a heart attack, but his family said he'd been declining rapidly ever since the interview, as if the act of speaking about the photograph had weakened him. The photograph remains in the Riverside Historical Society Museum, displayed in a small room dedicated to Henry Wallace's work. A placard explains the photograph's history and some of the documented anomalies. But museum staff report that visitors tend to avoid prolonged viewing of the image. Security footage shows that people often approach the photograph, look at it briefly, then quickly move on to other exhibits. A few visitors report feeling watched while standing in front of it. More disturbing are the recent reports from people who claim they can feel the figure's eyes on them, even when they're not physically present at the museum. Some people who've seen reproductions of the photograph online claim to have experienced the same sensation. The image has circulated through paranormal communities online, and there's now an extensive forum dedicated to discussing encounters with the figure Euro, the picnic phantom, as some have named it. People report that if you look at the photograph long enough, you might notice something that wasn't visible before. The figure is slowly moving. Frame-by-frame analysis of digital photographs taken decades apart shows subtle shifts in position. The figure behind the tree appears to be edging closer to the camera with each passing year. Some people have calculated that at the current rate, the figure will be clearly visible in the foreground of the image within the next 20 years. The museum board has debated removing the photograph multiple times, but there's a persistent worry that to remove it would be like opening a door. Some researchers believe the photograph serves as a containment Euro that, as long as it remains fixed and documented, the entity is bound to the image. Remove it, and something might be released. The town of Riverside has largely tried to forget about the photograph and the legend surrounding it, but it's become impossible to ignore. Whenever a visitor comes to the museum and sees the image, they leave changed. They report nightmares, a sense of being watched, and an inexplicable dread. Some leave Riverside quickly, unsettled by a presence they can't quite articulate. The last official statement from the Historical Society, given in 2019, was this: "We maintain this photograph as a historical document. We neither confirm nor deny the circumstances or phenomena surrounding it. We only ask that visitors approach it with respect and awareness that some mysteries may not have rational explanations." To this day, if you visit the Riverside Historical Society and you look at that 1,957 picnic photograph really closely, you might notice something in the background that makes your skin crawl. And if you're unfortunate enough to have one of those moments where you swear the figure is looking directly at you, staring with those empty black eyes, locals will tell you not to worry. They'll tell you the figure is still trapped behind the tree, for now, but they'll also warn you, don't look too long, because every person who truly sees it becomes connected to it. And the longer you look, the more it notices you in return. Because somewhere, in some dimension between the photograph and reality, that figure is waiting. It's always watching. And it's slowly making its way forward, one year at a time, getting closer to the edge of the From and closer to stepping out of it entirely.
Keep your doors locked. Did you choose a knife?
There's a suburban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, where something unsettling happens every year on the same night. This is the story of what residents call the Midnight Visitor, an urban legend that started as a whispered warning, but became something far more terrifying when people realized it was real. It all began in 2008, when a man named Robert Chen moved into a quiet cul-de-sac with his family. He was a software engineer, worked long hours, and wasn't particularly social. His neighbors barely knew him. What they didn't know was that Robert had a peculiar habitat. He kept meticulous records of everything, including every single night he experienced something paranormal in his home. According to Robert's journal, which was later found by investigators, it started on October 23rd. He woke at exactly 3:47 a.m. to the sound of his front door opening. Robert lived alone at the time. His family was visiting relatives in California. He described in his notes that he heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate. But here's the thing. When he worked up the courage to check, he found his front door unlocked, yet no one was inside. For the next 3 nights, the same thing happened. The door would open. He'd hear footsteps, but no intruder. By the 4th night, Robert decided to stay awake. He positioned himself on his living room couch facing the front door and waited. According to his journal entry, at 3:47 a.m. sharp, his front door slowly creaked open. Robert could see a silhouette in the doorway, tall, impossibly thin, wearing what appeared to be a dark coat. But the moment he turned on the lights, there was nothing. The door was closed, locked from the inside. Robert became obsessed. He installed security cameras. He set up motion sensors. He left his lights on, kept his doors triple locked, and documented everything. For weeks, nothing happened. Then October 23rd came around, again a euro. Exactly 1 year later, the visitor returned. This time, Robert captured something on his security camera. A blurred figure standing in his hallway at 3:47 a.m. The footage was distorted, almost like static, but there was definitely something there. In the split second before it vanished, you could almost make out human features, but they were wrong. Too elongated, too hollow. Robert became convinced that something was visiting him once a year, always on the same date, always at the exact same time. He began keeping a weapon by his bed. He posted about his experiences online, creating a detailed log on paranormal forums. Other people started coming forward, saying they'd experienced something similar in the same neighborhood. A teenager named Marcus lived 2 streets over. He reported waking at 3:47 a.m. and seeing a tall figure standing at the foot of his bed. He screamed. His parents ran in, but there was nothing there. The worst part? His security camera showed the same distorted figure in his room. When they checked the footage frame by frame, they could see this thing moving toward Marcus's bed at impossible speeds. The video stuttered and glitched whenever it got close. An elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson described the visitor differently. She said it stood outside her window every October 23rd at 3:47 a.m. staring in at her. She could see its outline pressed against the glass, and no matter how many times she blinked or looked away and back, it was still there, waiting. When her husband looked out the window, he saw nothing, but Mrs. Patterson insisted it was there, watching her specifically. The police investigated, of course. They found no evidence of break-ins, no signs of forced entry anywhere in the neighborhood. Forensic teams swept Robert's house multiple times. Nothing. The cameras were examined by tech experts who confirmed the footage was genuine a euro, not edited or tampered with a euro, but they couldn't explain the distortion or what was causing it. Then came the year that changed everything. October 23rd arrived again, and residents of the neighborhood prepared themselves. Some left their homes entirely, staying with relatives. Others armed themselves. Robert sat in his living room with every light on, waiting. At 3:46 a.m., all the lights in the neighborhood went out simultaneously. Not a gradual blackout a euro. They all died at once. Street lights, porch lights, house lights. Complete darkness. In that darkness, residents heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, echoing through the streets, entering homes, moving through hallways. When the power returned 12 minutes later, 3 people were found unconscious in their homes. Robert Chen, Marcus the teenager, and Mrs. Patterson. They were rushed to the hospital. The doctors found nothing wrong with them physically, but they wouldn't wake up. For 3 weeks, they remained in comas, unresponsive to any stimuli. When Robert finally woke up, he was changed. He was pale, traumatized, and completely unresponsive when asked about what happened. The only thing he would say over and over was, "It wasn't visiting, it was choosing." Marcus and Mrs. Patterson woke up a few days later, but exhibited the same behavior, traumatized, silent, repeating, fragmented sentences that made no sense. Robert checked himself out of the hospital against medical advice and disappeared. His house was abandoned, his journal left behind on the kitchen table. But here's the really disturbing part. The following October 23rd, new residents of the neighborhood reported the same phenomena, and the year after that, the midnight visitor didn't stop. If anything, it seemed to be expanding. Now, similar reports come from towns across Ohio, then neighboring states. Always the same date, always 3:47 a.m., always the same distorted figure. Online communities dedicated to the phenomenon have grown exponentially. People post their experiences, compare timestamps, share security footage. The consistent details are undeniable. A tall, thin figure, the precise time, the way cameras malfunction around it, the sense of being chosen or observed. Some people have moved away from affected neighborhoods. Others have created websites tracking locations where the midnight visitor appears. Paranormal investigative teams have descended on these areas during late October, hoping to capture evidence. What's particularly unsettling is a theory that's emerged among researchers. The figure isn't randomly visiting homes. It's searching for something or someone. And once it finds what it's looking for, it takes the Euro, not physically, but mentally, spiritually. Those who've encountered it directly go catatonic, and when they wake, they're no longer entirely themselves. Robert Chen's current location is unknown. His family reported him missing in 2015. Security footage from a gas station near his house, dated October 23rd, shows him standing motionless in front of the store for exactly 12 minutes before walking away into the darkness. The phenomenon continues. Every October 23rd, at 3:47 a.m., people across the Midwest report the same thing. A figure in their hallway, standing at their window, or watching from the shadows. The only difference is that you can't actually see it until the cameras catch a Tairo, and by then it's already chosen you. If you live in an affected area, locals will warn you. Lock your doors, keep your lights on, and stay awake on October 23rd. But they'll also tell you something more terrifying. Once the midnight visitor has noticed you, locking your doors won't matter. It's already inside your home in ways that doors and walls can't keep out. To this day, the phenomenon remains unexplained. Authorities have no official statement. Scientists have no explanation. All that remains is the pattern. October 23rd, 3:47 a.m., and the silhouette of something that should not be.
Some rides you don't survive.
Highway 61 stretches for over 600 miles through Minnesota and Missouri, connecting small towns and cutting through isolated stretches of woodland. Truckers and long-distance travelers know it well, but what many don't know is that there's a legend that circulates among regular drivers. one that most dismiss as urban myth until they encounter it themselves. It's called the Smiling Driver Euro, the story of a black sedan that appears on the highway during late-night drives, and the driver never blinks. The legend supposedly started in the late 1990 seconds, when a trucker named David Hartley reported seeing an unusual car driving alongside him for nearly 50 miles on Highway 61 near the Minnesota border. According to his account, given to state police, the car would match his speed exactly. When he'd slow down, it slowed down. When he'd accelerate, it accelerated. And all the while, the driver of the Sadna Euro, visible in the side window a Euro, was staring at him with an impossibly wide smile. David said he tried to speed away, eventually reaching 95 miles per hour on a straight stretch of highway. The sedan kept pace. He tried to brake suddenly and let it pass, but the sedan braked with him. It was like it was choreographing every movement he made. Most disturbing was that he never once saw the driver blink. The smile remained fixed, and the eyes never closed. After 51 miles, David took an exit and pulled into a rest stop. He sat there for 20 minutes, shaking, checking his mirrors. The sedan never appeared. David filed a report with state police, but admitted it sounded insane. He was probably exhausted, they suggested. He'd been driving too long. For years, that was the only report. But then, in 2004, another driver named Sarah Klein experienced something similar. She was driving from Paul to Kansas City when, around midnight, a black sedan appeared beside her. She saw the driver clearly in the moonlight a Euro, a man with pale skin wearing a dark suit and smiling so widely she could see all his teeth. His eyes were locked on her. Unlike David, Sarah immediately tried to lose the sedan. She pulled into the passing lane, accelerated, changed lanes repeatedly. The car always managed to stay alongside her. She described the driver as perfectly still despite the aggressive driving. No tension in his jaw, no grip on the wheel a Euro, just that smile. His mouth looked unnatural, stretched too wide, like someone had cut his face. Sarah eventually saw an approaching truck in the distance and raced toward it. She honked her horn desperately. The truck driver, confused by her erratic driving, flashed his lights. When Sarah checked her mirror, the black sedan was gone. She pulled over immediately, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't grip the steering wheel. She called 911 and reported everything to the police. Again, officers took her statement but found nothing. No black sedan matching her description was reported in the area. No accidents, no suspicious vehicles. But Sarah's report was different to Euro. She created a website documenting her experience and posted it online. Other people started responding. They had stories too. A salesman from Duluth had seen the sedan. A college student driving home for Thanksgiving had seen it. A nurse working night shifts had seen it. And every single account was consistent. The black sedan, the pale driver, the impossible smile, the unblinking stare. The stories gained traction in paranormal communities online. People started sharing techniques for what to do if you encountered the smiling driver. Some suggested speeding up. Others suggested pulling off the road immediately. Some said you had to look directly at the driver and refuse to blink a Euro. If you broke eye contact or blinked, the driver would somehow pull you out of your car. Others claimed that if you counted backward from 100 without stopping, the driver would disappear. Of course, most of this was dismissed as nonsense, the kind of folklore that internet communities create around vague fears and highway anxiety. But then the reports started becoming more frequent and more detailed. In 2008, a highway patrol officer named Jim Turner reported witnessing something unusual. He was conducting a routine traffic stop when the driver he'd pulled over mentioned an encounter with a black sedan. Jim was skeptical until later that same night. While driving home, he saw it himself, a black sedan with tinted windows, matching his speed exactly, and when he looked over, he saw the driver's face. The smile was so wide it looked grotesque. The skin was waxy, almost translucent, and the eyes never blinked. Jim did something the other drivers hadn't done a Euro. He tried to pursue it. He hit his lights, accelerated, tried to pull over the vehicle. The sedan didn't speed up or try to escape. It simply vanished. Not gradual a Euro. It was there one moment, illuminated by his headlights, and the next, it was gone. Jim checked for exits nearby, but there were none. The car had simply disappeared into the night. Jim wrote a detailed report, something that had to be reviewed by his supervisor. His supervisor was skeptical but concerned. Multiple credible people a trucker, a nurse, a college student, and now a law enforcement officer were reporting the same phenomenon. A decision was made to take the reports more seriously. Over the next few years, highway patrol officers across Minnesota and Missouri began documenting sightings. The data was striking. The appearances clustered around specific times, almost always between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. They almost always occurred on Highway 61 specifically, though a few reports came from parallel routes. The vehicle was always described identically, a black sedan, late 1992 model, impossible to identify further due to darkness or tinting. The driver was always the same, pale, smiling, impossibly wide, never blinking. What was truly disturbing was that several drivers reported that after their encounter, they experienced severe anxiety, insomnia, and what psychologists called intrusive imagery they couldn't stop visualizing that smile. Some developed phobias of driving. Others reported seeing the smile in their peripheral vision for weeks or months after their encounter, even when they knew nothing was there. A man named Thomas Wright decided to drive Highway 61 specifically to try to find the sedan. He documented his drive meticulously, recording video the entire time. At around 1 a.m., as he was passing through a particularly isolated stretch of highway, a black sedan appeared beside him. Thomas kept his camera steady and looked directly at the driver. What he recorded was disturbing. A face that seemed slightly off-center, like a mask that wasn't fitted quite right. The smile was impossibly wide, the skin unnaturally pale, and when the driver's lips parted even wider almost like the face was splitting Thomas could see only darkness inside the mouth. No tongue, no teeth, no throat just darkness. Thomas nearly drove off the road in shock. When he looked back, the sedan was gone. His video, which he posted online, went viral. It had been viewed millions of times before he took it down, claiming he was receiving death threats from people who thought he'd faked it, or worse, people who said they recognized the driver. In 2015, a woman named Emma Chen reported an encounter with a twist. She said that when the sedan appeared beside her, the window rolled down, and the driver spoke. She couldn't make out the words They sounded like they were being played backward or in a language that didn't exist. But she understood the feeling they conveyed, an invitation. The driver was inviting her somewhere, and the invitation felt urgent, almost compulsory. Emma managed to exit the highway at the next ramp. She pulled into a rural gas station and called for help. When state police arrived, she was in severe distress. She was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, where she spent 3 months undergoing treatment for acute anxiety and what doctors described as a break from reality. When she was discharged, she refused to drive on any highway. She'd moved to an urban area and now takes public transportation exclusively. The strangest case came in 2019 when a driver named Marcus didn't report an encounter His family did. Marcus had been driving home from a late shift when he encountered the sedan. His family never heard from him again. His car was found 3 days later, parked perfectly in a rest stop on Highway 61, doors locked, engine off, and completely empty. No signs of struggle, no blood, no indication of foul play. Marcus had simply vanished. Police investigated extensively. They found no leads. Marcus's case remains open. His family released a statement asking if anyone had seen him or his vehicle that night. They received hundreds of responses, many from people describing the black sedan and its driver. The authorities' stance on the smiling driver has evolved over the years. While they don't officially acknowledge the phenomenon no official police bulletin has ever been issued Individual officers have quietly warned drivers about staying alert on Highway 61 during late-night drives. Some rest stops have posted informal notices suggesting drivers travel in pairs and remain vigilant. The paranormal communities online have created elaborate theories about what the smiling driver might be. Some believe it's a ghost of a serial killer from the 1970 seconds who died on Highway 61. Others think it's something non-human, a being that feeds on fear or fascination. There are those who suggest it's a collective hallucination, a shared delusion created by the power of suggestion and the isolation of late-night highway driving. But the consistent reports, the physical evidence caught on video, and the documented disappearance of at least one person suggest something more sinister is occurring. Whatever the explanation, one fact remains. People continue to report encounters with the black sedan and its driver on Highway 61. If you find yourself driving that stretch of highway late at night and you see a black sedan pulling alongside you, don't look. Keep your eyes on the road, accelerate or decelerate abruptly, and exit at the nearest ramp. Because if the driver of that sedan smiles at you with that impossible smile, and you make eye contact, the one thing everyone agrees on is this: you'll never quite be the same again. Some even say you'll start seeing that smile in mirrors, in crowds, in your dreams, and eventually you might find yourself behind the wheel of that black sedan yourself, forever driving alongside other travelers, wearing that smile, never blinking, forever extending an invitation to go somewhere no one should go.